When you have low-skilled immigration from people who are not interested in integrating, you will have a problem. That is something that needs to be looked at.
Kemi Badenoch has stirred up a firestorm with her latest comments on the immigration rise in the UK.
They signed a letter demanding that foreign criminals be allowed to stay in Britain. Dozens of Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs repeatedly signed these letters insisting that rapists and murderers be allowed.
The immigration issue in the UK isn't just a crisis anymore. It's now an out-of-control, full-blown disaster.
Costs have gone up.
Let's put this in simpler English. It's making us poorer.
It's making, yes, if you look at GDP per head, the money in our pockets, I'm afraid.
Labour is now receiving furious backlash not only from opposition leaders, but also from the British public for their shambolic handling of the immigration issue.
I disagree. I think that immigration is already too high. And when I was in government, I was constantly told by, OBR reports and the IFS, etc., that we needed immigration for growth. We had more immigration than ever before, and the growth was not commensurate with that. We need to change the way things work. It's too high, and we need an economy where all of those people who are out of work in this country get back to work. That's where we need to start.
Kemi Badenoch's bluntness on immigration issues raises many questions about Labour's poor leadership.
Numbers matter, but integration matters more.
Yes, culture matters more, yes.
Yeah. When you talk about this, who are you talking about, and why would integration be more difficult for some rather than others?
Trevor, you've asked me this question before, I remember.
And I didn't get an answer then, so I'm asking you
Actually,
again.
you got a very, very clear answer. And one of the things that I don't think we have been doing in this country properly is having a proper immigration strategy. And many people assume
Immigration rise that's making Britain unlivable for many needs to be addressed soon.
And the numbers that we have seen over the last few decades mean that we are getting people having separate and insular communities. The most extreme example of this is what we saw with the rape gangs, where people who've been coming to this country from the 60s, from a particular region and sub-community in Pakistan, get here, stay insular, not interested in integration, and then you start seeing very, very toxic, I would say evil habits propagating, and no one doing anything about it.
Immigration is becoming a huge disaster for Britain, and Kemi's voice resonates with many Brits who feel helpless and hopeless.
You said that you worried about peasants who form sub-communities. Now, you can explain to me what you mean, but one way of reading this would be that you would prefer to have more middle-class Nigerians and fewer people from rural backgrounds in Bangladesh.
Let me be very, very clear. Immigration is too high, across the board, legal or illegal. But the point I was making there was about a specific report on that community of people who are predominant in the rape gangs.
The escalating immigration debate is forcing Britain into an uncomfortable situation.
Things that I'm trying to fix. I hear a lot of people talk about Asian grooming gangs, about Pakistani grooming gangs. A lot of people are being blamed. A lot of innocent people who happen to share characteristics are being blamed. So let's be specific. That was a literal word that has evidence behind it about where these people have come from, what they have been doing.
So
and we should not be afraid to talk about that.
So we're going to apply a class lens to our immigration.
And this is, Trevor, forgive me, this is one of the problems that
Keir Starmer needs to face reality. Why should hard-working Brits be forced to live in fear because of criminals who were allowed to stay?
we should not treat somebody who has no education, no English, no skills, the same as a wealthy doctor who has come from a country close by like France. And at the moment, that's what's happening. And that's what's been happening for many, many decades. We can't do that. It's not sustainable. We need to be able to make sure that the people who are coming to our country are people who contribute. And of course, we will have exceptions where we have refugees, genuine asylum seekers, not just people who are claiming asylum when they're actually economic migrants.
Calls for the deportation of illegal immigrants are rapidly gaining support across the UK.
We're running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019. Time and again, the Conservative Party promised they would get the numbers down. Time and again, they failed.
We need to admit that Britain's system is reaching a breaking point, one where the resources available to locals are stretched thin due to the unchecked rise in tax, low growth, no reform, and immigration. Labour's approach to immigration has become less about solutions and more about shifting the blame. Keir Starmer isn't offering a real plan, he's just pointing fingers. As per his remarks, every failure at the UK's borders is the fault of the previous government. He is afraid of taking any responsibility, just claiming the system is broken while conveniently ignoring their stance on immigration. While Brits are furious, and who could blame them? Strolling through any major city, it hardly feels like Britain anymore. It is not the same Britain we grew up in.
Because a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. It isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment.
Labour has always been keen on the blame game, it's their favourite sport. Just like they pinned every economic woe on a supposed £22 billion black hole, they're now dumping the entire immigration crisis at the feet of the Conservatives. According to them, the Tories haven't just failed to control immigration, they've actively made it worse. Years of mismanagement, ignoring the strain on public services, and now, surprise, surprise, Brits are furious. The NHS is overwhelmed, the housing crisis is spiralling, local services are collapsing, and what's Labour's grand solution? Point fingers, shout about Tory failures, and pretend they had nothing to do with any of it.
And mark my words, this government will turn the page. That begins in the economy, because you cannot separate this failure from their refusal to do the hard yards on skills, on welfare reform, on giving our young people opportunities, rather than the easy answers of looking overseas.
At some point, it seems like the Labour government is trying to acknowledge that the UK needs immigration to drive its economy, to support essential public services, and to maintain its global standing. But they also understand that without proper infrastructure and strategic planning, immigration becomes a point of contention only. Let's not forget that old Britain, where communities felt secure and hard work was rewarded. It is fading fast, replaced by soaring crime, overwhelmed public services, housing crisis, job struggles, and a government that simply won't listen. It's not paranoia, it's not fear-mongering, it's a reality. The statistics don't lie, violent crime is up, fraud is up, and shoplifting has hit a 20-year high. And yet, the government's solution? More of the same failed policies that got us here in the first place.
Let me say directly to the people watching, where the last government failed you, this one will not. They drove immigration numbers up, we will get them down. They left the NHS flat on its face, we will get it standing tall again. They made you poorer, we will put more money in your pockets. It won't be quick or easy, but we are going to turn things around.
By hammering the Conservatives, they're cashing in on public frustration, using every crisis as a campaign slogan. It's not just about exposing Tory failures, it's about selling themselves as the grand saviours of Britain. They promise a fair and controlled immigration system, a shiny new era of order and stability. But let's be real, these are the same politicians who have dodged tough decisions for years. Their promises sound nice, but where's the proof they'll deliver?
See an increase of 184,000 to 906,000 in 4 years. If we think about the previous decade or more, in terms of the sorts of numbers we were talking about, what's shocking is not the way the figures are arrived at. This is one of those occasions, a bit like the 22 billion, a bit like the prisons are overfull, where the shock through the system is the sheer size of the number.
What's interesting here is how both sides, Labour and the Conservatives, are playing the blame game. The Tories point to Labour's own history of relaxed immigration policies as the root cause of today's issues, claiming that their time in power under New Labour led to an immigration explosion that the country wasn't prepared for. The Conservatives argue that Labour's handling of immigration during the 2000s laid the foundation for the chaos we're seeing now. In this high-stakes political game, neither side is innocent, but Labour is trying to paint the Tories as the ones most culpable for the current immigration quagmire. The pressure is mounting on Labour to find a way to balance compassion for immigrants with the growing frustration of citizens who feel left behind in a system that seems to prioritise newcomers over the very citizens struggling to make ends meet. After all, how can a government that's failing to provide jobs and security for its own citizens effectively manage the influx of people coming into the country? That's the tough question now hanging over Labour's leadership.
The Attorney General, appointed by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, has just pledged total, lifelong allegiance to the ECHR, the same body that keeps telling us we can't deport foreign rapists and paedophiles because of their human rights.
Now, I'm proud to say that since taking office, this new United Kingdom government has taken steps to uphold our obligations and the international rules-based system. The new United Kingdom government...
Right now, the optics aren't looking great. While the country grapples with an immigration crisis, Labour's focus seems scattered. The party, traditionally known for its stance on social justice and workers' rights, has found itself in a bind. On one hand, they want to appear compassionate, embracing the idea that immigration is vital to the economy, filling labour shortages, and enriching the UK's diverse culture. On the other hand, they can't ignore the growing chorus of working-class voters who are fed up. These are people who can't find steady work, who are watching their neighbourhoods change, and who feel like their concerns about jobs, housing, and public services are being swept under the rug in favour of appeasing the loudest progressive voices in the party.
...of the court.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But here's the news of the day. Labour has tabled changes to the illegal immigration bill. Currently, anyone who enters Britain illegally cannot ever claim asylum, and there is a duty to deport them. Now, Labour want to remove that. Why on earth do they want to do that? How can they say this?
Serious answer is to smash the gangs. We have to take those gangs down, to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, to smash these gangs.
The reality is that the UK's job market is in shambles, and it's becoming harder for Labour to explain why they're not tackling that first. There are growing numbers of people who are unemployed or underemployed, living paycheck to paycheck, and increasingly angry at the government's inability to address their concerns. The housing crisis is worse than ever, with many finding it nearly impossible to get on the property ladder, while the NHS is overwhelmed and local services are barely keeping their heads above water. With such dire domestic issues to manage, how can Labour stand firm in advocating for more immigration when their own people are being left behind? It's an issue that continues to haunt the party as the narrative shifts from an open, welcoming stance to one of pragmatic survival for ordinary Britons.
Done is put the investment, put the stuff into tackling returns.
They're literally going to make it easier for people who come to Britain to stay in Britain illegally. It's insane. Saying that Britain is open for business, Keir Starmer tweets this. Look at this. With my government, Britain is open for business. Well, the problem is, Sir Keir, under your government, Britain is open to absolutely anybody else as well, isn't it? As other countries get tough, Britain has gone soft.
The idea that immigrants should either adapt to British society or pack their bags has sparked outrage in some quarters, particularly from those who believe in a more inclusive and tolerant approach to immigration. But Badenoch isn't concerned with political correctness or playing nice. She's all about facing the uncomfortable truths head on. In her eyes, integration isn't just a buzzword, it's a non-negotiable requirement. Kemi Badenoch clearly believes that if you come to this country, you have to become part of it, or there's no point in being here, with a level of conviction. She was stalking her ground on a controversial issue that many politicians shy away from addressing so directly.
Yeah, but what about what Labour are not now doing about particularly illegal immigrants coming into the country? Almost, 16,000 deportations, that's about 5 months' worth of illegal small boats.
Well, I think it's the highest number of deportations since 2018. Labour have also, they've been in 6 months. You've got to employ and train the new Border Security Command. Discussions are taking place at the moment on a new treaty with Germany, which we expect to be signed in the summer to deal with the migration problem.
At a time when many politicians are treading lightly on immigration, trying to balance empathy with policy, Badenoch has thrown caution to the wind and gone for the jugular. Her words weren't just aimed at the immigrant population, but also at the political class that spent years tiptoeing around the subject. She's accusing them of being too soft, of failing to hold newcomers to account for the societal expectations of their new home. She challenged, her tone defiant, and perhaps most shockingly, she doubled down by implying that if migrants were unwilling to integrate, they should simply leave. The suggestion that migration could be conditional on full integration rather than a more nuanced approach is where Badenoch's stance really begins to spark intense debate.
Many European countries now, ironically, are looking at exactly the same scheme, and I suspect the Labour government in the next few weeks and months are going to have to resort to a very similar scheme because the Labour government in 6 months have done precisely, as you well know, nothing about the problem of illegal immigration. But I want to go back to the question about Kemi Badenoch. I want to go back to the question about
The Labour government claims that Badenoch's statement fuels xenophobia and creates a hostile environment, leaving no room for the gradual, often challenging process of cultural and societal integration.
Is being done to tackle the border.
So you think in 6 months' time, if we diarise that you come back on this show and talk to me in 6 months' time, that the number of small boat illegal migrants into this country would have reduced? Can we put a pin in that and agree that we will put a calendar note in, and I'll bet you £100 it hasn't happened?
I'll bet you 100 it has.
Okay, done, okay. Noted.
British people are praising her for finally saying what many have been thinking but haven't dared to articulate. It seems that for Badenoch, this isn't just about immigration, but about setting a new tone in British politics. She wants to redefine the conversation, focusing not just on welcoming immigrants, but demanding something in return, full commitment to the social fabric of the UK. The real drama lies as a scenario in which Badenoch is framing immigration as a deal, a contract with Britain, and she's making it clear that the stakes have never been higher.
Saying that this will be policed. What she is saying to those that seek to come here, that you should come here expecting it to be British and Britain by way of culture and rules, regulations, laws and customs. She's not saying it will be policed, but I can't see how she's wrong. I mean, I would not expect her to go and live in Dubai, where I'm off to tonight, by the way, actually, and I will test this out. I might get to the airport and insist that the regulators, the police, the courts and the customs there adapt to my every whim. How do you think I would get on?
For weeks, the Labour Party and the Tories have been engaged in a bitter feud, with the Labour Party positioning itself as the party of compassion and inclusion, while the Tories have pounced on them, accusing them of being soft on immigration and failing to protect the country's interests. As the debate escalates, so has the PM's approach to immigration, with arrests and deportations on the rise raising the question, is this a genuine policy shift, or is it a calculated move to win political favour?
Since Labour came to power, immigration enforcement raids have increased by more than a third over the same period the year before. But despite more than 3,000 arrests over the past 6 months, it's still only a tiny fraction of the number of illegal immigrants here, with unofficial estimates putting that figure at more than 1.5 million. Mark White, GB News, North Wales.
The revelation here is that these arrests are likely not an isolated event, but part of a larger, long-term strategy. Sources close to the PM have hinted that he is laying the groundwork for a much bigger narrative about national security and border control that he can use as a cornerstone of his election campaign. In the end, this crackdown on illegal immigration might be less about protecting the country and more about shaping a new political identity.
The number of people here working illegally is at least 1.5 million. We don't know the true figure, so the government doesn't publish it. The government can't publish it because it's the great unknown, but we know it's a big issue.
I mean, as a woman, my first concern is safety, really. And if our government doesn't know who's in this country, then I don't feel particularly safe, and I know a lot of women and girls feel exactly that way. I must say that a lot of people getting in touch saying, oh, this is the low-hanging fruit, this is the easy stuff when it comes to illegal migration, workers who could have previously been on seasonal worker visas and things like this. Would you agree with that?
First off, the UK's birth rate is absolutely plummeting. In 2023, it hit a historic low, dropping well below the replacement level, meaning fewer babies are being born than necessary to sustain the population. While some may claim this is no big deal, the reality is that fewer babies mean fewer future workers, taxpayers, and consumers. So who exactly is going to keep the economy running when all the older folks start to retire? Oh right, immigrants.
the massive issue of the huge number more people who are going to come and live in this country according to these projections. By the way, legally, so I mean, if we don't want them, surely the government could stop that from happening. But the government is obsessed, Labour and Tories, obsessed for years with the idea that you need to import people to do jobs. Somehow growth is delivered by having more people in the country. But prediction of an extra 5 million people from 22 to 32, only 7 years away, and 6 million increase by 2040.
If we look at the other part of the story, then we can't deny the fact that without immigration, the UK would be looking at a rapidly shrinking, aging population. That means fewer workers filling the growing number of jobs in healthcare, agriculture, and hospitality. If we take a look around, sectors across the board are already facing severe labour shortages. Imagine the chaos when there's no one left to fill those roles. Who's going to serve your coffee? Who's going to work in your hospital? It's not just a hypothetical problem, it's a literal problem that we are facing now.
Focusing on 2022 to 2032 yesterday, but if you can just take the 2024 numbers out of 2040, you're right, a 6 million increase. But actually, all of that increase and a little bit more is net migration, because over the next 15 or 16 years, we'll see kind of a decline in the population through natural replacement. Pretty much what that means is we're going to have fewer births than deaths. So if there was no migration between now and 2040, the population would go down. And some people might think
the UK would be facing a future with a shrinking workforce, a struggling economy, and a massive burden on social services. Immigration isn't just some policy talking point, it's the lifeline keeping the UK afloat. Whether we like it or not, that's the harsh truth. The reality is that only a controlled and organised immigration system can prevent the UK from failing. If you want to save Britain, please like and subscribe for more updates.